Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the latest energy price increase in the UK in terms of historic comparisons with other major economies, because there may be people who are being allowed to believe that what's happening in the UK is no different to anywhere else, just because there are global problems with energy supplies right now that are easy to explain. But what's happening in the UK is way beyond what's happening elsewhere. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So we'll just say, first of all, recorded another Sunday roast with Max and Alex, which will be on Max Roastbeer's channel tomorrow. Hopefully remember to put a link in the description to the channel. You can find the video yourselves. It's not actually out yet. But the energy price rise. Talked about it yesterday. We'll be talking about it in the stream this evening as well. We'll keep coming up. But I talked about it yesterday from one angle. Now it's time to see sort of what it really looks like from further out. First, let's look at how we're dealing with the crisis compared to other countries. So latest reports you'll be able to see show hefty inflation across a range of countries, including the G7 nations separately. And energy is the greatest driver of inflation in these countries, including the UK. So energy prices are the main factor in high inflation, you could say, everywhere. But the UK is experiencing much higher inflation than any other comparable economy. It's forecast to continue to have a significantly higher rate of inflation over the next few years at least as well, because the forecast was for quite high inflation this year, although the forecast keeps going up. But it was expected that inflation would come down next year. The latest now is we can expect double-digit inflation next year as well. Well, even a month or two ago, this was not what was being predicted. You know, we've also seen by far and away the greatest increase in energy costs. Up until now, the cost of energy for domestic consumers has increased by 54% in the UK, but it's going to up to 178% increase compared to this time last year. This doesn't compare favourably with other major economies. These figures show that Italy has by far and away the worst of the rest, but it still pales into relative insignificance when compared to the UK. Bear in mind, some countries may still increase their prices further, so these figures aren't set in stone. In fact, ours are going up much further in a few months' time as well. But whenever you look at the average prices and how much they've risen as a percentage, in the UK, it's always been way higher than these other countries. I'll say always been, I mean during this crisis. Because beforehand, it wasn't. I actually checked, and even during the Conservatives' time in power, most of the time, energy prices just increased roughly in line with inflation. It was there. It wasn't like above inflation. It's only recently where that's been the case. So because with other countries, they've kept theirs down a bit and sometimes a lot, doesn't seem credible that any other country is suddenly going to start overtaking us in terms of percentage increases in the cost of energy. And it's really down to the fact that government has levers to control costs. No other comparable country would allow their government to do as little as we're allowing our government to do. I had a comment yesterday from someone saying, well, they couldn't see how the government could help. This is exactly what the government want people to believe, that it's all these external things, nothing the government can do. Doesn't matter how external something is, there's always something the government can do. That's what the government exists for. You know, and if there's nothing the government can do, why is it that people in other G7 countries are not suffering the same proportional increases that we are? Not anywhere close. You know, how can the US and France keep theirs down to single-digit percentage increases when ours is about to hit treble-digit percentage increases? If governments don't influence things, how come France, Germany and Italy, the three largest economies in the EU now that we've left, and in the single market indeed, how come they've all got very different inflation rates? All those three economies, very different energy inflation rates. And how come all of them put together still don't come close to our figure? In France, as I say, so far it's risen by just 4%. Different countries are applying different solutions to the problem. France, which controls their state supplier, just made sure that consumers weren't being hit by excessively high energy price increases. In fact, part of the reason that France has been able to control their prices so well is because we're paying for it, or we're partly paying for it. The French state-owned EDF is one of the major energy suppliers in the UK. They, along with the other big energy companies, have been raking in massive profits. In the case of EDF, those profits don't, well, especially now that France have increased their stake, don't so much go to shareholders as back off to the French state's coffers. And they can therefore be used to keep energy cheap for the French public. To give an idea of just how much corporate greed in the energy sector is ramping up our inflation to even higher levels. So I did a few calculations. So like I said, first of all, I wanted to know how energy prices have been increasing up until last year, roughly in line with inflation, no problem there. So even during the Conservatives' time in government, energy prices had been keeping step with inflation. Domestic energy bills are now 54% more expensive than they were last year. We currently have an inflation rate of just over 10%. Incredibly high, but the energy price inflation is 5 times higher. And this is for domestic consumers. Remember, there's no protection for businesses against energy price increases at all. So their energy inflation is much, much higher. After this week's announcement, energy prices are going up by another 80%. So remember, it's multiplicative there. So that represents a 178% increase in energy prices over the last year. I believe the latest forecast is for inflation to reach 14% next year. That's going to go up because the energy price inflation is already over 5 times higher than overall inflation. In October, unless the government does something, it'll be about 15 times higher if we say inflation goes up to about 12% then. Then we're expecting another large increase in the new year. In fact, compared to energy prices in the summer of 2021, the forecast for next year, next spring, is basically over a 400% increase. Now, if inflation is running at 14% at this time, 400% increase, that is roughly 30 times as much, isn't it? Roughly 30 times as much as the overall CPI rate of inflation. So the rate of inflation is going to massively go beyond 40% because the energy prices are a big factor in that inflation. You know, even in just the new year before, it's still winter, it's supposed to be a 290% increase. Average energy bills of over £400 a month in winter. And that's spread across the year. So the energy companies might try and charge people more because they're worried about paying or something. You know, you don't even want to think about what it's going to become if your energy bills are above average, because this is based on averages. The average is expected to be in winter, in the new year, when it's still winter, over £400 a month. That's for average. If your bill is above average. And this is why the government have to do something. They are now talking about doing something. Boris Johnson saying, oh yeah, it'll be fine. There's pipeline of cash, loads of cash. How come there were no cash this spring then? But of course, he's talking on behalf of someone else now. He doesn't have to deliver. It's Liz Truss that has to deliver. She's saying she's going to do something, but she's not saying what. You know, so when we get a government next week, is it next week now? I think it's next week now, yeah. Week after. When we get a government in September, if Truss becomes Prime Minister as widely expected, she is going to have to do something. I mean, she has basically already U-turned because she's talked about, and the handout she said she wasn't going to give, she's now said she's going to have to. I expect her to adopt as short a term a solution as she can that probably lands us with a big bill later on. She may even be self-aware enough to know she's definitely losing power at the next election. Maybe she'll adopt a solution that sets up a financial time bomb for when Labour take over. Because that's what Boris Johnson did a lot of the time, not so much specifically for Labour, but he applied short-term solutions that meant long-term trouble, but as far as he's concerned, that's for another government's problem. You know, you look at, and Liz Truss was instrumental in this as well in the early days, like the Australia-New Zealand trade deals. The real hit to us doesn't come for about 10 years, 10, 15 years. That's fine. They knew they weren't going to be in power then. Another government can deal with that mess. But Liz Truss has to do something. If energy bills goes up, it's really this simple. People can't afford it. And I don't just mean people on the lowest incomes at this point. Just ordinary people can't afford it. People's incomes has to go up to compensate. The government isn't interested in allowing people's incomes to go up with even the current rate of inflation. And actually, the inflation is going to get so high next year, you can actually see most businesses just being unable to increase the pay of their workers by that much. Large corporations may be a different matter, but for ordinary businesses, normal businesses, it's not going to be possible. So the government certainly aren't going to be able to back anything that allows people's incomes to keep up with the out of control rate of inflation. That's not going to happen. Simply not going to happen. So what they have to do is they have to reduce the size of the bills. That's what they have to do. They have to reduce the cost of living. Simple maths. What is less simple is how to do it. Because however the government choose to do it, someone needs to pay for it. That's because prices are increasing around the world. So how do the government pay to keep our energy bills down? France did it by a combination of nationalised energy and making more profit from British consumers with the full permission of our Tory Brexit government. Germany are trying to get people to use less energy. How will our government pay for it? Well, we don't have nationalised energy, and it goes against their political beliefs to persuade people to use less energy. I do notice that the Chancellor, Zahawi, has recently been urging people to use less energy, but he seems to be a lone voice in the Tory party at the moment. Kwasi Kwarteng, as was pointed out to me yesterday, was saying, actually I had read him saying this as well, saying that the government don't want to tell people not to use energy. It's like, well, it's not up to us to tell people. It's like, you're not telling them, you're just advising them. But anyway, there needs to be a massive cash injection from somewhere. Labour's plan is to get that cash from oil companies' profits. I talked about another plan in a couple of videos, which means borrowing and a bigger tax bill later on to pay for it all. So it's like a choice between, do we get the oil companies to pay for it out of their profits, or do we get the taxpayer to pay for it out of, our diminishing incomes, but in a few years' time, dump it all on another government? I'm a little concerned that I think I know which one they will go for. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.